Hi everyone, welcome to our workshop on reinforcement. We are so glad you are here, and hopefully by the end of this workshop you will have learned some things that will be helpful to you in your daily life, in the classroom, and wherever else. Let's get started. We wanted to introduce you to the instructors that made this course. We first have Blaine Stemple. He has been in the field of ABA for 9 years and has been a BCBA for 5 years. He has experience working in the hospital, clinic, home, and school settings. He has a Master's of Education with an emphasis in ABA, and he is a current student in the Clinical Psychology program at Missouri State University. And then we have myself. My name is Michaela Campbell. I have been in the field of ABA for 5 years now and have been a BCBA for 1 year. The other 4 years, I was a registered behavior technician. I have experience working in homes, in the clinic setting, and experience working in the school settings. I have an immense gratitude for teachers and everyone that work in schools. And I have a Master's of Education with an emphasis in ABA as well. And then I also am a current clinical psychology student at Missouri State University. We want to review the course objectives before we get started. So by the end of this workshop, we hope that you'll be able to define reinforcement and identify types of reinforcers along with schedules of reinforcement, discriminate between positive and negative reinforcement, identify the parameters of reinforcement, discriminate between effective pairing and ineffective pairing, conduct a preference assessment, define group contingencies and considerations, and finally, reflect on and incorporate these principles into your own professional lives. To start, we want to talk about human behavior, and human behavior is so very complex. It's an ongoing interaction between a person and their environment, and we like to think of this as a behavioral stream. So we have tons of waves, tons of things going on, and it's just this constant ongoing interaction between a person and their environment. To begin, let's take 5 minutes to reflect on what your own behavioral stream looks like when you get home from the day. So focus on the interactions between you and your environment. And to do this, include 3 events that occurred in your behavioral stream. And make sure to reflect on what happened, what you did, why you did what you did, and the outcome. And again, really focus on the interaction like we talked about in that behavioral stream. So focus on the interaction between you, yourself, and then your environment. This is my examples that I came up with. So maybe you walk into your living room and it is a mess. Instead of cleaning, you sit on the couch and you watch your favorite show. Later, you can't find your phone charger because the living room is so messy. So we have that environment. We have you walking into your living room and it's just messy. So your environment's messy. And then you decide to, instead of cleaning, you want to sit on the couch and watch a show. It's been a long day. And then what happens later is that you can't find your phone charger because the living room is so messy. Another example is you're in the kitchen and your dog barks. So again, we have that environment, that dog barking in the environment. We do what we do, so we go outside and we play with our dog, and then because of that, we get lots of snuggles with our dog and get some fresh air. So again, we can see the environment, and then our actions, our behaviors, and then what's resulting because of that. Lastly, we have another example. You were scrolling Instagram and saw a new dinner recipe. You decided to make the recipe and had a delicious dinner with your family. So again, we have that environment. So we have Instagram, right? And we have that dinner recipe that's popping up in our environment. And so then we decide to engage in the behavior of making that recipe. And because of that, we get this delicious dinner with our family. So again, in all 3 of these examples, we can see these interactions between the environment, what's happening in the environment, and then what we're doing, and then the consequences of what we're doing. In order to really look at the behavioral stream, we have to analyze a single wave because like we talked about, it is so complex and we can't really look at the whole ocean. We can't look at this whole stream and figure it out. And in order to really understand behavior, we have to start to analyze it wave by wave. But while keeping in mind that it's still within this big stream. It's still within this behavioral stream. So we have to look at the behavior in context by analyzing a single wave. To analyze a single wave, we're going to break it down into 4 parts. So we have motivation, antecedent, behavior, and consequence. And again, we're really going to keep in mind that we're just analyzing a single wave. So we have to keep in mind that all 4 of these parts are within a bigger and larger behavioral stream, and everything is constantly affecting each other. To start, let's talk about motivation. So motivation is a variable that strengthens or weakens the value of a reinforcer. Let's talk about an example to break this down. In this first example, you slept 8 hours, and that's going to decrease the value of coffee because you're feeling great, you're feeling energized, you don't really need an energy boost, so that value of coffee is going to decrease. So that coffee is the reinforcer, and that value of coffee is going to decrease. And so that's going to result in you're not going to stop at the coffee shop on the way to work because you're feeling great. And this is an abolishing operation. Quick little jargon warning. These are some really jargony terms, but we'll kind of break them down later. But decreasing the value of coffee, that's going to be an abolishing operation. So then on the other example, we only slept 4 hours. Maybe we were up with a baby, maybe we were sick, maybe our dog was barking all night long, and this is going to increase the value of coffee. Because we only slept 4 hours, we're feeling really tired, and we really need that energy boost, so that's going to increase the value of the reinforcer, which in this case is coffee. And so we're going to speed straight to the coffee shop on our way to work, and this will be an establishing operation. Again, because we're increasing the value of coffee. I mentioned those jargony words. We have establishing operation and abolishing operation. So an establishing operation is a motivating operation that increases the current effectiveness of a reinforcer. So in the previous example, we only slept 4 hours. That's going to be an establishing operation because it's going to increase the value of coffee. On the other hand, we have abolishing operation. An abolishing operation is a motivating operation that decreases the current effectiveness of a reinforcer. So in that previous example, maybe we slept 8.5 hours that night and we're feeling really refreshed. That's going to decrease the value of the reinforcer, or in that case, coffee. So again, we have establishing operation and abolishing operation. That brings us to antecedent. So if you think back to analyzing that single wave, we've got 4 parts. So we just talked about motivation. Now we're going to talk about antecedent. And you may have heard a lot of these terms before, especially if you've taken our previous workshops, but we just want to make sure to review all of these things as we start to add on with more complex concepts. So now we have antecedent, and that's what occurs before the behavior. So we have motivation and then antecedent, and that is going to be something that occurs before the behavior. We reviewed antecedent, and again, that's something that happens before the behavior. So in the examples we talked about in our behavioral stream, maybe that's the dog barking, and that is followed by you letting your dog outside. So again, it's those things that happen before we engage in a behavior. Now we're going to talk about behavior, and before we do this, we want to start with a little activity to really get us thinking about what we think about behavior. So take 2 minutes to write what comes to mind when somebody mentions the word behavior. And this can be anything, just whatever first comes to mind. So this is often times when we think about behavior, we think about things like, oh, the student was in a behavior. They were screaming, they were punching, they were running out of the classroom, they were fighting with someone else. We think about behavior in terms of these things that often have a lot of negative connotations. And in applied behavior analysis, that is not the case. So we refer to behavior as really anything anyone does. So when we talk about behavior, it's really a myth to think that it's only these negative things. To us, in the field of applied behavior analysis, we're going to think of behavior as anything someone does. So that can be maybe you're drawing, maybe you're listening to music, maybe you're eating, maybe you're thinking, maybe you're playing soccer. It can be anything. And it can even include things like we commonly think of behavior, like screaming, hitting, all those things. So it's really anything that someone can do. The definition of behavior, according to Fisher 2021, is we define behavior quite broadly to include anything an individual does when interacting with the physical environment. So we talked about the behavioral stream, that ongoing interaction, and behavior is within that ongoing interaction, and it's anything we do that's interacting with the physical environment. So like I talked about before, listening to music, playing soccer, maybe we are running, maybe we hit someone on the playground. All of these things are behaviors that we engage in within the physical environment. That brings us to consequence. So we've talked about antecedent, we reviewed motivation, we've reviewed behavior, and now we're on to consequence. And this is what occurs after the behavior. So maybe an example is in our behavioral stream, we hear the dog bark, that's going to be our antecedent. We engage in the behavior of letting them out and playing with them, and the consequences, we get lots of dog snuggles and we get some fresh air. The problem with jargon, we've got another little jargon warning. So the problem with jargon is within consequences are often associated with getting in trouble. I know before I was in the field of applied behavior analysis, I often thought of consequences as oh, you're getting in trouble, or you're going to get a consequence later, and it's something, has that negative connotation. In regards to behavior, in the field of applied behavior analysis, consequences are just events that occur after behavior. So consequences can increase or decrease the likelihood of the behavior in the future. So again, it's just something that happens after the behavior. So maybe we open the fridge, engage in that behavior, open the fridge, and we get our favorite drink. Or maybe we let the dog out, we get some fresh air. Things that happen after we engage in that behavior are going to be consequences. So they're not just things that we associate with getting in trouble. So that's, again, the problem with jargon within different fields is that we often have different meanings for different words. And so, like we talked about in our other workshops, if you ever hear a term that's confusing, just ask. A lot of times, and within different fields, we're talking about the same thing, but we're just using a different word. So let's continue on talking about consequences. We just talked about consequences, we've reviewed motivation, antecedent, behavior, and consequence so far. So now we're going to do a quick little review. What occurs after the behavior? So we have A, antecedent, B, behavior, C, consequence, and D, motivation. So again, what happens after the behavior? If you guess C, you are correct. That it would be consequence. So a consequence, like we just talked about, occurs after the behavior. A, if you guessed A, that's an antecedent, and that occurs before the behavior. B, behavior, again, we talked about behaviors, anything that we do to interact with the environment. And then D is that motivation that we talked about earlier. So whether that's going to increase or decrease the value of reinforcers.